Ukrainian drones struck Russia's largest oil refinery in Omsk, deep in Siberia, on Monday in what would be one of Ukraine's longest range attacks of the war, Kiev's military said on Monday. Local Russian authorities confirmed the strike. Ukraine's general staff said that the strike had caused a fire at the Omsk refinery, located around 2,700 kilometers, 1,700 miles from Ukrainian-held territory and close to Russia's border with Kazakhstan. If this wasn't like a war of aggression on the part of Russia trying to literally invade and take over Ukraine, then I might be against this sort of thing because it's going to have adverse effects on not only Russia's war effort, but on the citizenry themselves. And it's been shown that there's been extreme fuel shortages going around the country since Ukraine has been doing its oil refinery strikes over the last year or so. But because it's a war of aggression and because the way that Russia's been acting, they've been hitting homes and apartment buildings, and there's been a number of different massacres that human rights groups have come out and said they have proof of. To me, makes it more okay that they're going to do this kind of thing, that if Russia's going to fight dirty, then if there's any way that Ukraine is going to respond in turn and fight dirty, that this is one of the best ways to go about doing it, instead of just doing what they're exactly Russia's doing and hitting apartment buildings and going after civilian infrastructure like water treatment plants or something like that. And because theoretically Russia is a much larger country, a much larger economy, they have the ability to prolong this war of attrition much longer than Ukraine has, and that they could potentially hold out longer. Because the Russian economy is so reliant upon oil, that going after their economic engine, which is oil refineries, strategically makes a lot of sense to me. Oh, I haven't had lunch and I drank a Slurpee right before this. I'm kind of getting the sugar shakes a little bit. There were no casualties, and emergency services were working at the scene, Kutsenko said in a post on the Russian messaging app Max. It was not immediately clear how much damage the refinery had sustained. It surprises me that no casualties were sustained in this strike, because I'll show the video on screen right now. It's a pretty big explosion, and because of the fires going on the sides of the screen from the video that it shows from this specific drone striking, that clearly other drones had already hit the facility, and so it was multiple spots in the facility that had been hit by drones. Maybe they knew that the drones were coming in through some air surveillance system or air defense system or whatever, and that all of the workers were able to take cover inside bunkers or something like that. I hope that's the case, right? I don't want some random Russian worker at an oil refinery just trying to make ends meet getting killed by a Ukrainian drone strike or whatever, right? That's not necessary. You want to destroy their ability to refine this oil because of its influence on the Russian war effort and the economy and whatnot. But you don't want to kill some random Russian citizen who's just trying to get by and doing their job or whatever, right? That's not right. So if this is the case, if no casualties were sustained, that's a good thing. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky, speaking in his nightly video address, described the attack as an important achievement for the armed forces of Ukraine. Siberia, too, is now within the reach of Ukrainian precision strikes. The Ukrainian defense technology company Firepoint said its upgraded FP-1 drones carried out the attack and described it as a record for strike drones not only in Ukraine but worldwide. Prior to this, the Omsk oil refinery had remained out of reach for Ukrainian drones. The Omsk refinery had remained one of only 2 refineries in the top 10 that had never been hit by Ukrainian drones, Firepoint CEO Irina Terek said in a statement. I know Ukraine has been going pretty hard lately over the last year and have been having a lot of success in drone strikes inside Russia proper, and especially on infrastructure like Russian oil refineries. But the fact that they've hit now 9 of the 10 biggest oil refineries in the entire country is very impressive, and would be consistent with the fact that they're experiencing extreme fuel shortages domestically as a result. Remember when Russia thought they were going to steamroll over Kiev in a week since they started their full-on invasion in 2022, right? Man, we are so far removed from that. Sources told Reuters that the Gazprom Neft-owned Omsk refinery processed around 23 million metric tons last year, or around 460,000 barrels per day. Ukraine has been escalating a campaign of strikes against Russian oil refineries, at times causing acute fuel shortages across the country's 11 time zones. 11 time zones in Russia? I know it was big, but that's bonkers. How many do we have in the US, not including Hawaii or the Samoan Islands or whatever? In continental US, we have 4, I think, or 5 or something like that, right? 11 is bonkers. Aside from Omsk, Ukraine's military overnight hit Russia's Ust, Luga, and Vyazk ports, which handle oil exports from the Baltic Sea, as well as targets in the Kaluga and Yaroslavl regions, local governors said. So yeah, like I said before, I'm like tepidly in favor of this sort of thing, right? I think Russia to some degree has brought this upon themselves with the way that they've acted about all of this. If the reasoning behind this war were like a truly 50-50 situation, then I might be more against this kind of thing because of its effects that it's going to have domestically on the average Russian that isn't part of the military effort. But because of the war being the result of Russia literally being the invaders, trying to take over the Ukrainian territory and govern it as their own, and the way that they've been like kind of going after overtly Ukrainian civilian infrastructure and assets by hitting like apartment buildings and electrical plants that have nothing to do or no connection to military bases or anything like that, to me makes this kind of effort reasonable. And also from a strategic standpoint, it makes a tremendous amount of sense, right? Because Russia is so much larger in terms of mass, population, economy size, in theory, because this is turned into a war of attrition, they have the ability to hold out much longer. So one of the only ways that Ukraine is going to be able to gain a leg up on the situation is by going after their ability to maintain their war machine, by going after the economic powerhouse of the Russian economy, which is oil production. So yeah, I think we're going to see more of this in the future. And I have to imagine that Russia, because they are much more willing to violate like human rights and go after civilian stuff, that in retaliation, you might see more stories of like, oh, Russia just struck this Ukrainian apartment building and 50 people died or something or whatever, right? Because they're going to just have to start lashing out in some sort of way to make up for the losses they're experiencing, because Ukraine seems to be outpacing the Russian war effort in terms of drone technology and military ability. All of this on top of the fact that apparently Ukraine has successfully captured the Black Sea, which was a big military asset for Russia at times during this war. And it shows that like a true 50-50 stalemate has stabilized on the front line. And in fact, in places and potentially very significant places, Ukraine is making gains on Russia. I might do a whole story on this, but Zelensky even came out recently and said they've successfully captured all of Crimea and that they have completely crushed Russia's ability to hold the region. So yeah.